You're watching AM Agenda. I'm David Lipson, and joining me here in the Canberra studio is the Shadow Communications Minister Jason Clare. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, David.
Out of Senate estimates hearings yesterday, we have heard that $7 billion has been ploughed into the NBN, the National Broadband Network, and just 3% of the rollout completed. Why is that?
Well, the NBN is a very important project, and I've said repeatedly the key challenge here is we've got to speed up the construction of it. It's too slow, and we've got to fix it. Under the Labor government, our policy was fibre to the premises for 93% of Australians. The Liberal Party's got a different approach. They want to give fibre to the premises to a small amount of Australians and different models to other Australians. They also promised before the election that everyone would get access to the NBN by the end of 2016. So by the next election, everyone would get 25 megabits per second. Last year in December, they broke that promise, and that's no longer going to happen. The key challenge here, I think, is we've got to speed up the rollout of the NBN. We've got to fix that and build it, not break it, which is what this government's doing. Well,
the government's saying they are going to speed it up. Do you take any responsibility as the former government of the fact that only 3% of the rollout has been completed? Most of that was during your term.
It's too slow, and it's got to be built more quickly. I worked in the construction industry for 5 years before I went into Parliament, and one of the things I learnt there is the more you do it, the more you build, the quicker you get at it, the better you get at it, the more efficient and productive you are. I think they are getting better at rolling out the NBN, but it's still too low. It's still too slow. They need to speed that up.
Not a single end user customer of the gigabyte per second service. That was something that Julia Gillard and others in Labor talked up a lot at the time, this gigabyte speeds. Was that overcooked?
Well, David, there weren't a lot of cars on the Harbour Bridge in the 1930s either, but there are a lot now. I was in the United States over Christmas and went to Kansas and had a look at what Google's doing. They're rolling out a fibre service to all of Kansas City, and they're providing everybody with one product, which is a gigabit service. Now, Google's not a charity. They're a big multi-billion-dollar business, and they're providing this service because they think there's going to be a future demand for it. What the NBN needs to be about is building for the future, setting us up for the future, not just for the next 5 years.
Okay, turning to the drought and assistance that will be fleshed out, details later on this morning. Labor has welcomed the debt guarantee element of this, but as a representative of a city electorate, what do you tell your voters as to why farmers should get this money and sometimes assistance for manufacturing and others doesn't come through?
Well, the issue here is inconsistency. I think the people in my electorate in Western Sydney care as much about the bush as the people in the bush, and they know that farmers are doing it really tough and they need emergency assistance. You bet they do, and I'm glad the government's going to announce it today. I think what they're going to announce is ostensibly what we have been calling for the last month. So the sooner they get that out the door and help our farmers, the better. The problem is the government is not helping workers in my electorate who are suffering because they're turning their back on them.
So the debt, and the
low interest loans and interest-free loans, yeah.
That's fully supported by Labor. Does it go far enough? Because Bob Katter, for one, on Sky last night says that 280 million isn't enough. It's not going to get there.
I think you said, David, just a little bit earlier that it builds on top of what we've already done. It's necessary. We support that. We've been calling for it for a month. It's taken a while for the government to act, but now that they're announcing it, we're going to back it.
We just heard Jamie Briggs suggesting that Labor should get out of the way when it comes to helping Qantas. Two areas he's pointing to. One, getting rid of the carbon tax, which would lower the bills for Qantas. The second one being the Qantas Sales Act, which Qantas itself is calling for and loudly. Why is Labor blocking this in the Senate?
Well, there are two different positions between the parties. The Liberal Party want to amend the Qantas Sales Act to allow it to be majority foreign owned. We don't agree with that. We think that Qantas should be majority owned by Australians. And there's two real reasons for that. 8 out of 10 of the major airlines in the world are owned or have an interest of a foreign government in them. If you change the Qantas Sales Act so that it could be majority foreign owned, Qantas would be owned by another country. So we don't think that's the right thing. The other point...
But why not, just first of all? Is it purely just the aesthetics of it, that we would rather own it in Australia? What are the actual reasons for...
Well, let me answer that, but also the other reason why we don't think you need to make that change to the Qantas Sales Act is that there's currently a threshold of 50% foreign ownership. It's only at 39%, so there's no issue there. There are other parts of the Qantas Sales Act that set caps or limits at 25% and 35% for individuals and corporations. Happy to look at that. But we don't think that that 50% is a threshold that's been breached yet or needs to be breached.
Yeah, but it probably hasn't been breached because they're not able to breach it. If
38 or 39%.
Sure, but you wouldn't necessarily go all the way up to 49 if you're thinking of investing. If you can't go beyond that, there's no point if you can't get control of the company.
Well, not necessarily. Once you get a stake of a reasonable size, you get a position on the board. So don't get distracted by that. The other thing the Prime Minister has said is he wants a level playing field for Qantas. Now, there are provisions in that Act that determine maintenance being done in Australia and regional services. So if the words being used are a level playing field are really code for sending maintenance jobs overseas or reducing regional flights to different parts of Australia, then job cuts and service cuts to regional Australia are other things that we would not support.
But are job cuts better than the whole company going kaput?
Oh, we want Qantas to thrive and grow into the future. You bet we do. It's an important Australian company and there are different ways to support it, but we don't think the way to support it is to sell it to another country or to see massive job cuts by making changes to the Qantas Sales Act.
Okay. And just finally, we heard yesterday evidence given by the ABC in relation to its services and in light of suggestions that its funding may be cut after a review.
Yes.
Now, the guarantee couldn't be given by the ABC that it would maintain or quarantine any particular services. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is a bit of a concern because the ABC has said if their budget is cut in May, then they could not rule out cutting regional radio services. Now, ABC Regional Radio provides important local news and sport, emergency broadcasts when there's flood or fire and so forth. And so the risk of big cuts to ABC Regional Radio is a real worry. And so I'm calling on my National Party colleagues, who I'm sure are watching this now, to grow a spine and stand up to the Prime Minister and tell the Razor Gang that's putting the budget together, don't cut the ABC budget because it will potentially lead to cuts to ABC Regional Radio.
Is it a bit early to be sending that message though? Because at this point it's just a review and certainly no regional services are being cut.
David, now's the time. The budget's being put together now. Down in the Cabinet room, ERC is meeting and they're deciding where they're going to cut. Now, the Prime Minister has said no cuts to the ABC, as well as no cuts to education, health, SBS, no changes to the pension. If he cuts the ABC budget, then he's broken his promise. It'll tag him as a liar, and now's the time for National Party MPs to say, don't do this, because it'll lead to cuts to local services in my community.
Shadow Communications Minister Jason Clare, I'm having trouble communicating. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, David.